My name is Jenna Sullivan. I am 22 years old, and this is my true story. This really happened to me, and it completely changed my life. I once trusted someone deeply, but what they did to me was so shocking, so terrifying that I'm still haunted by it. Today, I want you to know how betrayal can come from the people you love the most. What started as something small soon turned into a nightmare I never imagined. If you really want to know how it all happened, then stay with me till the very end, because my story will leave you speechless. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and remember this story is written and edited by Dark Life. Side Diaries. I met Aaron 2 years ago at a college party, and at first glance he was the kind of guy every girl dreamed of. Tall, funny, with a smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room, and for a while I believed I was lucky to have him. He'd text me good morning every single day. He'd show up at my door with coffee. He'd listen to my problems, and even when my best friends warned me that he seemed a little too intense, I brushed it off as jealousy. But little by little, his love stopped feeling like love and started feeling like possession, and by the time I realized it, I was already tangled in something I couldn't easily escape. It started small, with him asking me to text when I got home, then texting me again if I didn't reply within 5 minutes, then calling me repeatedly if I didn't pick up right away. And while some girls might think that's sweet, it quickly turned into dozens of missed calls if I dared to spend time with friends without telling him, or angry questions if I didn't immediately answer where I was and who I was with. But I kept telling myself it was just because he cared too much, until the night I noticed him outside my dorm at 2 a.m. claiming he just wanted to make sure I was safe, and the uneasiness crept into me like a shadow I couldn't shake. My friends, especially Kayla, started to hate him, saying he gave off bad energy, but I defended him again and again, convincing myself love was supposed to feel this intense, though deep down I already felt suffocated. His jealousy grew darker when I started my new job at a local bookstore, because suddenly every coworker was a threat, and Aaron began showing up unannounced, standing outside pretending to browse, but never buying anything, just staring at me, making sure I wasn't talking too long with customers. And my manager even pulled me aside one day to ask if everything was okay at home, which embarrassed me so badly. I lied and said Aaron was just protective, but later that night, when I told Aaron to ease up, his smile twisted into something cold, and he whispered, "You don't get it, Jenna. You're mine, and I'm not losing you." And the way he said it made my stomach drop, as if I was standing on the edge of a cliff. I wanted to break up with him, but every time I tried to gather the courage, he'd show up with gifts, apologies, and promises of change, and the cycle would start again. And part of me clung to those sweet early memories when he seemed perfect, but the other part of me knew I was ignoring something dangerous. Things escalated when I went to visit my parents over Thanksgiving break. I hadn't told Aaron exactly when I'd be back, but the moment I arrived home, he texted me, "Hope you had fun with your family." The drive back looked long, and when I asked how he knew I was home, he admitted casually that he had followed my car halfway, just to make sure no one bothered you on the road. And while he thought it was romantic, my heart raced with fear, because it meant he was tracking me. And when I asked if he was using some kind of app, he laughed and said, "Why would I need an app when I know you so well?" I couldn't sleep that night, lying awake wondering how far he'd go. And by Christmas, my friends staged a kind of intervention, telling me this wasn't love, this was control, and that if I didn't leave soon, something terrible might happen. But what they didn't understand was how scared I already was leaving. Aaron didn't feel like freedom. It felt like danger, because I knew he wouldn't let go easily. The breaking point came in February, when I noticed strange things in my apartment. My framed photo of my parents slightly tilted, my drawers open, though I hadn't touched them, and once even my journal left on my desk, though I kept it hidden in a locked box. And when I confronted Aaron, jokingly asking if he'd ever come by when I wasn't home, he smirked and said, "I don't need a key to your heart, Jenna," and walked away, leaving me frozen, realizing he might have been inside my apartment when I wasn't there. I started checking my locks, obsessively, even sleeping with a chair pushed against the door, but the sense of being watched only grew. And then one night, as I was about to shower, I noticed a small blinking red light in the vent above my bathroom mirror, and when I climbed on a stool to see, my stomach dropped. It was a tiny camera hidden inside, pointed directly at me, and the sickening thought that someone had been watching me for who knows how long made my skin crawl. And even though I wanted to believe it wasn't Aaron, deep down I already knew. And that night I didn't sleep at all, staring at the shadows in my room, terrified of what else I might discover. The moment I discovered that tiny camera hidden in my bathroom vent, my entire world shattered, because suddenly every second of privacy I thought I was gone, and the idea that someone, most likely Aaron, had been watching me in the most vulnerable moments of my life made my skin crawl in ways I can't even describe. So my first instinct was to rip the camera out with shaking hands and throw it into a drawer, but even after I did, I felt exposed, as if eyes were still on me, crawling across my skin no matter how many times I checked the room. I didn't know whether to call the police or confront him directly, and in the end, fear kept me silent, because what if the cops didn't believe me? What if he twisted the story, or worse, what if he found out I reported him and decided to hurt me for betraying him? So instead, I confided in Kayla, who was horrified and demanded I go straight to the authorities, but even as she spoke, I could see her own fear of Aaron reflected in her eyes, because she knew how unpredictable he was, and I promised I'd think about it, though deep down I already knew I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape alone. The next few days were unbearable. Every creak of the apartment settling made me jump. Every time I showered, I checked every corner, every vent, every drawer, desperate to find more cameras, but the paranoia was eating me alive, and still, I went to class and work pretending nothing was wrong, though Aaron's presence was never far, because he always seemed to appear when I least expected it, sometimes waiting outside my bookstore shift with that too wide smile, sometimes sending texts that proved he knew my exact schedule, and once even leaving a note on my car windshield that read, "You looked beautiful today," which might have been sweet coming from a boyfriend, but from him, after everything, felt like a warning, like a claim of ownership carved into my life. My breaking point came one evening when Kayla and I came home from the movies and noticed my apartment door was unlocked, though I was sure I had locked it, and when we pushed it open cautiously, nothing seemed missing, but my bed covers were slightly pulled back, like someone had sat there waiting, and Kayla grabbed my arm, whispering that we had to leave, and we did, running out like terrified kids, driving aimlessly until we stopped at a diner where she made me swear I'd break up with him for good. But the thought of telling Aaron it was over felt like walking into the lion's den, and yet the alternative was worse, letting him control me forever. So with trembling hands, I typed out a long message the next morning telling him I needed space, that I couldn't do this anymore. And when he replied within seconds, all he wrote was, "No," just that. No explanation, no begging, no anger, just one chilling word that told me he wasn't going to let me go, and the pit in my stomach deepened. For the next week, I tried to avoid him, ignoring his calls, not answering the door when he knocked, and even staying with Kayla at times. But Aaron found ways to remind me he was still there, like sending me pictures of myself walking to class, or my blinds slightly open with me visible inside, and each photo was timestamped just minutes before he sent it, proving he was close, too close, always watching. My friends pushed harder for me to go to the police, but fear of escalation kept me frozen until one night when I returned home late, exhausted, and noticed something taped to my bedroom mirror. It was a Polaroid photo of me sleeping, taken from inside my apartment, and scrawled in black ink across the bottom were the words, "Mine forever." My legs nearly gave out beneath me, and I ran into the hallway screaming, knowing without a doubt Aaron had been inside again, and the sheer violation of it broke something in me. Kayla came to pick me up and held me as I sobbed, promising she wouldn't let him hurt me, but the truth was neither of us knew how far he would go. I finally filed a police report the next day, bringing the camera and the Polaroid as evidence, and though the officer listened patiently, I could see the skepticism in his eyes, the way he warned me that without catching Aaron red-handed, there wasn't much they could do, but they agreed to look into it and advised me to change my locks and install security cameras, which I did immediately, spending what little savings I had just to feel a shred of safety. For a short while, things went quiet, almost eerily so, as if Aaron had vanished, and part of me wanted to believe he had gotten scared off, but another part knew better, because silence with Aaron was never peace, it was a buildup, like the calm before a storm. My fears were proven right when one night I woke at 3 a.m. to the faint sound of music playing in my living room, and when I crept out of bed, heart pounding, I saw my old record player spinning the needle, scratching out a haunting love song Aaron used to play for me, and on the table beside it lay a single rose and another Polaroid, this one of me sleeping just hours earlier in the same bed I had just left, and I screamed so loud my neighbors came rushing out into the hall as I fled my apartment. But by the time police arrived, there was no sign of forced entry, no trace of Aaron, just the rose and the photo, and once again they shrugged, helplessly telling me to stay with friends for a while. I moved in with Kayla, temporarily trying to pretend I wasn't falling apart, but the constant fear was gnawing at me, making Me paranoid even in her apartment, and the final straw came when she got a call one night from an unknown number. When she answered, a male voice whispered, "You can't keep her from me forever," before hanging up, and we both knew. It was him taunting us, reminding me that no matter where I ran, he would always find me. I knew then that the only way to end this wasn't just to run or hide, it was to fight back, to find a way to turn his obsession against him, but I had no idea just how far I would have to go or what dark things I would have to do to finally be free of Aaron once and for all. After that night, when Aaron called Kayla's phone, I realized hiding wasn't going to save me, because no matter where I went, he would crawl his way back into my life. And so I decided to flip the script, to stop being the terrified victim and start becoming the hunter, even though fear still clung to me like a second skin. I started small, retracing every step he could possibly use to get inside my apartment, double-checking locks, searching vents and ceilings again. But then I noticed something I had overlooked. The maintenance man from my building had a universal key set, and Aaron had once bragged to me about knowing a guy who could get him in anywhere, which made my stomach sink, because it explained how he slipped in without breaking anything. And I realized that meant Aaron always had inside help or had stolen a set himself, so I filed another police report. But again they said unless I caught him in the act, their hands were tied. I left the station that day shaking with anger, and as I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel, I made a vow that if the law wouldn't protect me, I'd protect myself. And that's when my revenge began taking root, because I refused to be his victim any longer, and if he wanted to stalk me, then I would turn his obsession against him. The first step was baiting him. I knew Aaron was drawn to control, to the idea that it was always just out of reach, so I started leaving tiny breadcrumbs on social media, posts that hinted at where I might be, casual check-ins at cafes or the library, even though in reality I wasn't there. And every time I felt the prickling sensation of being watched grow stronger, because I knew he was following, biting at the hook like a predator, convinced he was cleverer than his prey. Meanwhile, I set up cameras of my own, not just in my apartment, but hidden in my car, and even with Kayla's help in public spots, I knew he'd lurk, because if the police needed evidence, I was going to hand them more than they could ignore. And night after night, I reviewed the footage until my eyes burned, waiting for that one slip-up, that one undeniable moment that proved Aaron was behind it all. And finally came one morning. My porch camera caught him lingering by my door at 2:47 a.m., crouched low with gloves on, holding a set of keys and grinning straight into the lens as if daring me to notice. When I showed the footage to the cops, they promised to open an investigation, but I could still see doubt in their eyes, like they thought maybe I had staged it. And I knew then I couldn't rely on them at all, which fueled the fire inside me even more, because I wanted Aaron to pay not just for me, but for every single sleepless night, every single tear he'd made me cry, every single moment he stole from me. Kayla warned me that revenge would eat me alive, but she didn't understand that Aaron had already taken everything. So I had nothing left to lose. My next step was confronting the fear directly. I invited him in, not openly, but by leaving my apartment door unlocked one Friday night after posting that I'd be out drinking across town. Though in reality, Kayla and I were hiding just across the street in her car, cameras ready, and when Aaron slipped inside my apartment, I swear my whole body trembled with rage more than fear, because watching him on the monitor sneaking around my living room like he owned the place was the confirmation I needed that this man wasn't going to stop ever. I called the police immediately, but by the time they arrived, he was gone, and once again all they could do was take my statement. But this time I had footage of him entering with no invitation, and though the officers promised a warrant, deep down I knew Aaron would find a way to slither free just like before, which only hardened my resolve. I had to get smarter, darker, and so I came up with a plan that made Kayla pale when I told her, because it wasn't about catching Aaron anymore, it was about breaking him, turning his obsession into a trap that would crush him under his own twisted desires. I started texting him again, pretending to waver, to miss him, sending carefully crafted words like, "Sometimes I think about you," or "I don't feel safe without you." And each reply from him dripped with sick satisfaction, proving he still believed he had power over me, and that was exactly what I needed him to think, because the more comfortable he felt, the easier it would be to destroy him. I arranged a fake reunion, telling him to meet me at a secluded cabin my uncle once owned, a place deep in the woods where no one would hear a scream. And though Kayla begged me not to go through with it, I insisted, because it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about ending the nightmare before it consumed me entirely. The night of the meeting, I dressed carefully, not in something alluring like he'd expect, but in dark clothes that made me feel strong, armored, and I packed a small bag with tools I might need: a pocket knife, duct tape, pepper spray, and most importantly, a hidden camera strapped under my jacket to record everything. When Aaron showed up at the cabin, he looked exactly as I remembered, yet somehow worse. His smile too wide, his eyes hungry in a way that made me nauseous, and he stepped forward with arms open as if expecting me to fall back into them. But instead, I held up my hand and told him to stop, my voice steady though my insides were shaking, and he laughed, saying, "You always come back, Jenna. You know you're mine." And in that moment, I realized just how deep his delusion ran. How impossible it would ever be to reason with him, and so I lured him inside with soft words, pretending I just needed closure. While inside my head, I counted every second, waiting for the right moment. As he rambled about how we'd run away together, how no one else mattered, I positioned him exactly where I wanted him, under the rafters where I'd set up my trap, a weighted rope rigged to fall at a pull, and though my hands trembled when I yanked it, the heavy beam dropped close enough to send him sprawling, shocked, and before he could react, I sprayed his eyes with pepper spray and tied his wrists with the tape. Adrenaline giving me strength I didn't know I had for the first time in months, I felt control flood back into me. A rush so powerful it nearly brought me to tears because finally, Aaron wasn't the hunter anymore I was, but the real terror hadn't even started. Because now that I had him bound and whimpering on the cabin floor, begging me to let him go, I had to decide what kind of person I was going to be. Someone who handed him to the cops once again, or someone who made sure he could never hurt me or anyone ever again. And the thought of his smirk, his whispers, his cameras in my home flashed like lightning in my mind, and I leaned down close to him, whispering that he was about to learn what it felt like to be the one trapped, the one powerless, the one who couldn't escape no matter how hard he tried. The cabin smelled of damp wood and dust, and the ropes around Aaron's wrists creaked as he writhed against them, his eyes watering from the pepper spray while his voice cracked as he begged. I just stood there staring down at him, feeling a storm of emotions crash inside me: rage, fear, grief, and an intoxicating thrill of power, because for the first time since he slithered back into my life, I wasn't the one hiding. And as he whimpered, "Jenna, please, you know I love you, I only did it because I can't live without you," I almost laughed at the pathetic desperation in his tone. The same man who once gaslit me, stalked me, broke into my home, tormented me like a shadow that never left. Now he was the one tied up and trembling, and I wanted him to feel every ounce of the terror he drenched me in for months, so I crouched beside him, letting my voice drip with venom as I whispered, "This isn't love, Aaron, this is obsession, and tonight, I'm ending it for good." He tried to twist his head toward me, tried to summon the arrogant smirk he used to wear, but it faltered when I pulled out my knife, the dim lantern light catching the blade as I traced it lazily along the wooden floor close enough for him to hear the scrape and imagine what it could do to him, and his pleas turned into shaky promises. "I'll leave you alone, I swear I'll never come back." But I didn't believe him because he promised that before, and every time he came back stronger, darker, more dangerous. My camera hidden under my jacket was recording everything, every tear, every stammer, every denial, and I knew that even if I decided not to cross the darkest line, I already had the evidence to destroy him legally. But my heart was beating too loud, my hands itching with the desire for more, because justice didn't feel like enough anymore, not after what he'd stolen from me. I paced the cabin floor, my footsteps echoing in the silence, while Aaron thrashed and cried, and I thought back to every night I lay awake clutching a baseball bat, every time I jumped at a creak on the stairs, every friend who told me to just move on. Well, I lived in constant terror, and I knew deep in my bones that letting him go to the policeman someday, somehow he'd get out and come crawling back, because monsters like Aaron didn't just stop, they lingered, they spread, they infected everything they touched. My plan had always been revenge, but now face to face with him, tied at my mercy, I realized revenge wasn't about ending him quickly. It was about making him feel powerless, suffocated, hunted the way I decided to give him exactly that. I leaned down close enough that he could feel my breath and whispered, "Do you remember those nights you stood in the corner of my bedroom watching me sleep? The nights you whispered through the vents just to see me shiver? The notes you left that made me too afraid to even turn the lights off? Tonight I'm going to give all of that back to you." His eyes widened in terror, his whole body stiffening as I cut the tape around his ankles, yanked him to his feet, and marched him into the cabin's small cellar, a place my uncle once used to store tools, but now it would serve as something darker, a mirror of the prison he built for me in my own home. I chained his wrists to a beam not too tight, just enough that he could feel the cold bite of metal, and then I shut the door, leaving him incomplete. Blackness, his muffled cries echoing as I climbed back upstairs, my heart pounding with a mixture of triumph and dread because I had finally flipped the nightmare onto him. Hours passed as I sat outside the cellar door listening to him scream, whimper, curse and beg, and every sound sent shivers of grim satisfaction through me, though a small voice inside whispered that I was becoming something monstrous too, but I silenced it by reminding myself that he chose this every step of the way and I was simply his consequence. By dawn his voice had grown hoarse, his pleas weaker, and once I finally opened the door, the sight of him slumped and shaking made me feel a dangerous rush of power, like I was the judge, jury, and executioner, and when he lifted his head to croak, "Please, Jenna, I'll do anything," I realized I had reached the final choice: to let him rot in the darkness, to hand him to the law, or to finish him myself. My hands trembled as I lifted the knife again, and for a moment I saw flashes of blood, police headlines, prison bars, and my own life forever tainted by his shadow, and something inside me snapped. I didn't want Aaron to control even the ending of this story. I wanted to be free, and true freedom meant he could never breathe the same air as me again. With one deep breath, I whispered, "This ends now," and in the stillness of that cellar, I silenced him forever. His wide eyes, the last spark before darkness claimed him, and though my body shook violently, after though I collapsed onto the floor sobbing, I felt something I hadn't in months: peace, a chilling, fragile peace. I cleaned the cabin with meticulous care, burning the rope, wiping every trace, and with Kayla's help, who cried but stood by me, we buried Aaron deep in the woods where no one would find him, the earth swallowing his obsession forever. Days later, when people asked where he had gone, I simply shrugged, and when the police followed up on my complaints, I handed over the footage of him breaking and ensuring their files, painted him as a stalker who had finally disappeared, another obsessed ex who vanished into the night. Life slowly crept back into me. I slept without checking every corner, I laughed without forcing it, and though sometimes in the quiet I swore I still heard his voice, I knew it was only the echo of trauma fading. Aaron Parker would never haunt me again because I had written the ending to my own story, not as his victim, but as his executioner, and though the darkness of what I did will always live inside me, it also became my freedom, my survival, my revenge. And if you're listening now, I need you to remember this evil doesn't always look like a monster under your bed. Sometimes it looks like someone who swears they love you, someone who won't let go, someone who takes and takes until you're nothing. But shadows, don't wait for the world to save you. Save yourself no matter what it takes, because sometimes the only way to end the nightmare is to become something even darker than it is. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If you want more true horror revenge stories like mine, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because trust me, what I've told you here is only one of many.